Welcome to you all. My name is Dr. Wayfwan. I'm glad to have you guys on our webinar today. I'm going to share my screen and then we will hit the road running. Okay, all right. So today I'm going to talk to you guys about how our modern day diseases, as a result of the lifestyle choices we live, that cause our modern day diseases. These are my board certifications. I'm a board certified physician in internal medicine as well as pediatrics. And let's get right into it, guys. There is now more and more evidence that all the chronic medical conditions that we face today in modern day society as a result of metabolic dysfunction. And metabolic dysfunction is just simply a fancy medical term to say energy shortage. So all our chronic medical issues, most of what we face today as a result of an energy shortage. And that energy shortage is coming from two components, something we call insulin resistance and another thing we call microbiome dysfunction. So these two entities result in an energy shortage, metabolic dysfunction. That energy shortage then results in all the chronic diseases or most of the chronic diseases that we face today in modern society. You see, a cell needs energy to function. When a cell doesn't have the energy that it requires, that it needs to function, the cell malfunctions. So I want to take us through how these two entities, the insulin resistance and microbiome dysfunction, result in that energy shortage that then drives all the modern chronic day diseases that we face. Let's start by talking about insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is just simply a fancy medical term again to say that your insulin is not working well. So to understand what insulin resistance is important to understand how insulin works or what is the job of insulin in the first place. Now, I consider insulin to be a very, very critical hormone. I consider insulin to be the most important hormone in the body. I call it hormone numero uno in terms of importante. Insulin is like the CEO of the body. It dictates the smooth functioning and structure of the body. And why is that? Because this is the job of insulin. Insulin's job is to mobilize glucose out of the blood into the cell. You see, when we eat, the end product of whatever we eat is absorption. When absorption occurs, glucose is released into the blood. So, when that glucose is released into the blood, the job of insulin is to get that glucose out of the blood, mobilize it, into the cell. When the glucose gets into the cell, the glucose is fed through a special organelle in the cell called the mitochondria. Now, in the mitochondria, some of you may have heard in junior science class that the mitochondria is considered to be the powerhouse of the cell. In the mitochondria, what happens is that the glucose goes through a complex series of reactions called the electron transport chain, with the result being the production of an energy molecule called ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is an energy molecule. So that's the job of insulin, to help in producing this energy molecule. So why then do I call insulin the CEO of the body, the most important hormone of the body? Is because without insulin, you cannot make energy. And every cell in the body requires energy to function. When a cell has the energy it needs, it functions smoothly. When a cell doesn't have the energy it needs to function, it malfunctions. And the simple definition of a disease is a cell that has malfunction. It's a cell that has malfunction. Why did the cell malfunction? Because it lacked energy. So that's the job of insulin. Now that you understand how insulin works or the job of insulin, what then is insulin resistance? Insulin resistance is simply a breakdown in this process. Anywhere where there is a breakdown in insulin working properly, which is mobilizing glucose out of the blood into the cell, so that when it gets into the cell, it goes through that complex series of reactions to result in the production of energy. Anywhere where there is a breakdown, we say your insulin is not working well. Big term insulin resistance. Now, let's ask the question, how do you go from insulin not working well to insulin working well? Or how does the breakdown of insulin resistance occur? If my car breaks down and I take my car to the mechanic, the very first thing that the mechanic does is the mechanic runs a diagnostic to find out, why did Dr. Dita's car break down? What caused the breakdown? When the mechanic figures out what caused the breakdown, then can go and address, the breakdown and fix it. So I want to take you guys through how insulin goes from working well to not working well, what causes the breakdown. And there are two ways in which insulin goes from working well to not working well. And the first way we say is when you have too much fat. Okay. And that results in the second problem that results in insulin not working well, insulin resistance, too much insulin. Let's take the very first one, too much fat. You see, every time we consume food, all the food that we consume, all the food that we consume, and any excess calories more than the body needs, the body takes those excess calories and converts them into fat and doesn't know where to put it and puts that fat into the cell. This is how I'll depict that. The cell is normally supposed to look like this. So if you consume more calories than you're supposed to, the excess calories get converted to fat. The cell takes that fat now, that excess fat, the excess calories that have been converted to fat. The cell takes that fat now and stuffs that fat into this cell. Okay. Normally, this cell is supposed to look like this. And when normally that cell looks like that, when you have glucose in the blood, insulin can easily command this cell to say, hey, I got glucose in the blood, I want you to take it up. But you now have a case of chronic overnutrition in this scenario, where you now have a cell, because of excess calories, fat has been stored in that cell. When insulin now comes to this cell and knocks on the door of the cell, knock, knock, I got glucose in the blood, I want you to take it up so that it could go through the cell to produce energy. The cell tells insulin, this cell that is now fat laden, it tells insulin, I'm sorry, I don't have any room in the in. If I bring glucose in, glucose is not going to have any place to lay its head. I am fat laden, I am filled with fat. And so as a result, this cell doesn't open its door to insulin knocking, and glucose cannot enter the cell because the cell's space is occupied by fat. So you have a breakdown in insulin not working well because of the fat in the cell. Now, this cell is trying to protect itself from too much energy. If you have ever eaten too much on Thanksgiving, if you eat too much on Thanksgiving and you're so full, the last thing in the world that you're thinking about doing is to bring in another bite of anything into your mouth. Even if that bite of anything is your grandmother, your favorite pecan pie that your grandmother made. You are so stuffed, it's the last thing in the world. It grosses you out. This is exactly how this cell is feeling. And do you know what the favorite food or the favorite dessert for the cell is? It is glucose. Glucose is the favorite food for the cell. But unfortunately, this fat laden cell is so full, it has no appetite for its favorite food. Why is glucose the favorite food for the cell? Because when the cell takes in glucose, the cell can produce energy. The cell needs energy to thrive, to survive. But in a place where the cell is now fat laden, it refuses to open its mouth to take in its favorite food. So what happens now is that glucose begins to accumulate in the blood because the cell cannot take up that glucose, right? Now, there is a one-to-one relationship between the concentration of glucose in the blood and the production of insulin by the pancreas. a linear relationship. So when glucose concentration is high, it triggers the pancreas. A text message is sent to the pancreas uh, um, to produce a high amount of insulin commensurate to the glucose to try to bring the glucose down. So all of a sudden now the pancreas produces too much insulin. And too much insulin, guys, is no bueno. Why? Too much insulin. Remember, I described insulin as being the CEO of the body. It dictates, is the most important hormone in the body. It dictates the smooth functioning and structure of the body. So imagine the CEO of a corporation. That CEO normally is level headed, running his organization smoothly, things are going well. And one day that CEO comes to work, he has gone crazy. That's what too much insulin is. The CEO comes to work, he has gone nuts. He's yelling at people in the hallway. He is giving unreasonable orders, firing people left and right, embarrassing people, have say you're gonna do it my way or the highway, has just gone out of character. He has become like a bully and a tyrant, to his employees. What happens is that with that kind of behavior, the employees of that CEO lose their respect for their boss man. I don't know what's going on with boss man here, but they don't take kindly to that kind of bullying or tyrannical behavior. They lose their respect for the boss. If you lose your respect for your boss, it's hard for you to do what your boss asks you to do. So if I lost my respect for my boss and my boss came to me and said, "Hey, Dr. Dieter, I want you to do so and so, help me get this project done. This project is supposed to be done in the next 30 days, and I've lost my respect for my boss." I'm not listening to that with excitement, ready to jump to do that. I am reluctant. And if I'm normally the employee who gives the boss my A game every time, because I've lost my respect for the boss, when the boss comes to me and tells me about that project, I may bring my B plus or my C game to that project. You translate that to the cell. When insulin is too much, insulin is acting like a bully and a tyrant to the cell. The cell loses its respect for insulin. And when the cell loses its respect for insulin, the one thing that insulin tells the cell to do, the cell becomes reluctant to do it. The cell doesn't do it with all its heart. So insulin's job is to tell the cell, open your doors yay wide so that I can let glucose in. Well, the cell has lost its respect for insulin because insulin is acting like a bully and a tyrant. So when insulin says open your doors yay wide, the cell reluctantly opens its doors yay wide. So not as wide. So as a result, you don't have as much glucose entering the cell like you would have had if the cell had opened its doors yay wide. So what that happens is that causes more and more glucose to accumulate in the blood. When more and more glucose accumulates in the blood, remember there's a one-to-one relationship between glucose concentration and insulin production. The pancreas receives another message. I want you to produce even more insulin, to address this blood sugar, even more insulin to address the high blood sugar. So, as if the CEO of the boss was not crazy enough, that even more insulin is like a CEO who was crazy this level and raises their craziness level, even that becomes even more cuckoo. The employees of that CEO lose even more respect for the CEO, being even more of a tyrant. You translate that to the cell. When insulin's concentration increases even more, the cell loses even more respect for insulin. And when the cell loses even more respect for insulin, it goes from keeping its doors year wide, whereas it was supposed to have it this wide. It goes from keeping its doors year wide to now year wide, even tighter, closes his doors even more because it's lost respect. More glucose accumulates in the blood and it triggers more insulin. It's just a vicious cycle. So that's how too much fat and too much insulin results in insulin not being effective to have the cell take up glucose. And when you have that, we say you have insulin resistance. And when you have insulin resistance now, it causes a slew of these diseases. I want you guys to understand something. A lot of people sometimes hear insulin and their very first thing or the only thing that attribute insulin to is diabetes. And I want you to think about insulin as being the root of the tree, and diabetes is just like one of the branches of the tree. When your insulin is not working well, you're not able to make ATP, energy. And every cell in the body requires energy to function. Every cell. When a cell lacks the energy that it needs to function, it malfunctions and you develop diseases, the high blood pressure, the heart disease, the cancer. All these things are related to insulin not working well. Cancer, some of you guys may be surprised to hear that only 10 to 30% of cancers are the result of bad luck genetic. The other 70% of cancers as a result of your insulin not working well. So this slide is not exhaustive. There are many other diseases that we are not able to enumerate on this slide whose root cause is insulin resistance. So we've talked about that. Let's go to the second thing, microbiome dysfunction. How does microbiome dysfunction feed into energy shortage, metabolic dysfunction? Let's just understand what the microbiome is. The microbiome is a group of bacteria that live in the gut. They are 30 to 100 trillion bacteria that live in our gut. Okay, those 30 to 100 trillion bacteria that live in our gut are called the microbiome. They have specific functions. You see, when God created us, He created us purposefully and put those bacteria in there. We're supposed to live in what we call a do for me, I do for you relationship. Quid quo pro. They scratch our backs, we scratch theirs. We are supposed to provide for these organisms food and shelter, and in turn, they're supposed to do all of these functions for us listed on here. I want to highlight just one or two of the functions. One of the functions that the microbiome does is it helps a very, very important function is that it helps to train the immune system. This bacteria, this help to train the immune system. When the gut is healthy, when the microbiome is healthy, it gives the immune system a healthy training. A healthy training looks like this. You see that bacteria right there? He's a bad guy. You could probably take him out with just a handgun. Just use just a handgun. You take him out, and that'll be it. You don't need an AK-47 killing style for him. Just a simple handgun, you could take him out. And then another training it gives the immune system is this. Hey, listen, you see that bacteria right there. It says, oh, you see that guy right there. And the microbiome tells the immune system, the immune system says, what guy? I can't see the guy you're talking about. And the microbiome says, the reason you cannot see that guy is because he's in camouflage. He is part of us, but he's in camouflage. He's doing some reconnaissance work. Do not fire bullets at him, please. He's part of us. That's a healthy training to the immune system. An unhealthy training to the immune system when the microbiome is unhealthy, it looks like this. You see that guy right there, that bacteria right there, he's a bad dude. You know what? He deserves to die. But even though a simple handgun, a simple bullet will take him out, why use only a simple bullet when he's a bad guy? Spray him AK-47 style. Let's get some real fire in. So it trains the microbiome. The microbiome trains the immune system to be hyper reactive, to be ready to pull the trigger for any reason. Triggerly excited, if we will put it that way. The other thing it does is that, hey, look, you see that guy right there? He may be in camouflage. I don't know. I'm not too sure. But you know what? I don't have time to figure out whether he's in camouflage or whether he's part of us or the enemy. Let's do this. Just blow his head off. We'll take him to the autopsy table and we're going to determine whether he was the enemy or part of us. So it trains the immune system, shoot first, ask questions later when the gut is unhealthy. that results in the immune system attacking the body's cells. And therein lies how you develop autoimmune diseases. You guys may not know it, but 70% of our body's immune system resides in the gut. 70%. The other 30% resides in the bone marrow, the lymphatics, the lymph nodes. And the microbiome is in charge of training the immune system. Another function I will highlight is that it helps to protect the gut from what we call disease-causing bacteria, pathogenic bacteria. And it does so by producing a very special fatty acids called a short-chain fatty acid. You see, the cells of the gut are lined together like this. You look as you see my fist, a cell to a cell. They come together and line. Imagine multiple different fists, fist to fist, fist to fist, making the wall of the gut. Where my knuckles meet in the cell, it's called the tight junction. Where two cells of the colon join to form the wall of the colon is called the tight junction. That tight junction is like a security point to prevent bacteria and toxins from escaping into the blood. This short chain fatty acid, that is produced by the microbiome, you cannot get these fatty acids from eating anything. They go and pour cement on this tight junction. It's like cement. Think about the short chain fatty acids like cement pouring, their cement on here to make it tighter. The tighter it is, the less chances that it gets weak for bacteria to escape into the blood and cause an infection. And so those are some of the functions of the microbiome. I will not go through all of them, but you could see what is depicted on here. Now, we say you have microbiome dysfunction or dysbiosis when there is an imbalance in the microbial population. You see, the bad bacteria in the gut, this bacteria in the gut live in a 50-50% population. The good bacteria 50%, bad bacteria 50%. Now, microbiome dysfunction is when there is an imbalance. The bad bacteria increase in number to, let's say, 70% at the expense of the good bacteria that decrease to 30%. And what causes this is a shortage of food. You see, the food for the microbiome is fiber. Okay. Unfortunately, we do not consume enough fiber. And when there is a shortage of food, right? The bad bacteria, the stronger bacteria. Anytime there is shortage, it sets into motion panic, survival of the fetus. Think about when we were in the pandemic. When you go to the grocery store, it's survival of the fetus mode. All the bread is off the shelf. All the milk is off the shelf. All the tissue paper is off the shelf. Survival of the fetus. When there is shortage, what happens when there's a shortage of fiber? The bad bacteria, that are the stronger bacteria, hoard the very little fiber that is there to themselves. And then they say to themselves, you know what? For us to keep a hold on this fiber, let us go ahead and increase our
So
army.
there's a lot of doctors on here, right?
Uh,
Doctors.
Dr. Kenny, could you help me mute everybody? Let us go ahead and increase our. Am I good?
You are now.
Yeah.
Okay. So let us go ahead and increase our army to keep a hold on this little fiber that we have, at the expense of the good bacteria. And that's how you have an imbalance in that microbial population. When you have an imbalance in the microbial population, these functions of the microbiome now become compromised. When they become compromised, you develop diseases like this. Colon cancer, a good chunk of colon cancer linked to an imbalance in the gut. I talked about the microbiome training the immune system. Lupus is an autoimmune disease that the microbiome is trigger happy. It comes from dysbiosis. Hashimoto's an autoimmune disease. Celiac, an autoimmune disease. Multiple sclerosis, an autoimmune disease. Even something like even something inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, all those things. I want to highlight something here which may surprise you guys: anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression is as a result of dysbiosis. You may not know it, but the hormone that is responsible for our mood, the hormone called serotonin, 90% of that hormone is produced in the gut, and the other 10% is produced in the central nervous system. So if 90% of serotonin that is supposed to maintain our mood and happiness is produced in the gut, and there is an unhealthy gut, it's not going to be able to produce this 90%. You have anxiety and depression. Now, this other slide here is a slide I call the metabolic sequence of inflammation. It comes as a result of the two culprits, insulin resistance and gut dysbiosis, resulting in energy shortage, metabolic dysfunction. So it's like a fire starts right here. That fire spreads to metabolic dysfunction, results in what we call oxidative injury to the cell. When a cell is injured, the cell cries out to the immune system. The immune system's way of protecting the cell is to deploy an inflammatory response to the cell to see what the problem is, to help the cell. The inflammatory response gets to the cell, but the problem is not in the cell. The immune system is actually seeing smoke here. The fire started 2 houses ago at insulin resistance, spread to metabolic dysfunction before spreading to the cell. So the inflammatory response is not able to take care of the issue going on in the cell because the core of the problem is not in the cell. So what happens is that this inflammatory response that doesn't take care of the issue, it causes what we call bystander injury. That bystander injury, some other cells are injured. Those injured cells cry out to the immune system, which deploys more inflammation. And then this process of insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, oxidative stress, it continues. So you continue to have a situation of chronic inflammation, and that chronic inflammation then drives the disease or symptoms that we have. Now, as bleak as all of this is, there is hope, because there's now more and more scientific evidence that if you reverse the core issues that cause the energy shortage, the metabolic dysfunction that then resulted in these disease states, then you will reverse the disease state. I put it this way: if you have a car and you're riding on the road and the car runs out of gas, what's going to happen is the car is going to stop. When a cell runs out of energy, it malfunctions, it stops working. The car has run out of gas, it stops working. The car stops not because there's an intrinsic failure of the engine, it's just simply because of the lack of energy. If you walk to the nearest gas station, you buy gas, go back to your car on the side of the road and pump gas in that car. When you sit back in the ignition seat and turn on the engine, that car roars back to life again. If you have ever run out of gas, I ran out of gas 2 times and it's embarrassing. If you have ever run out of gas in your life, there is never a thought in your mind after you've put gas in that car like, I wonder whether this car is gonna start again. That thought doesn't even cross your mind because the reason the car stopped is because it ran out of energy. I put gas in it back inside. The thought doesn't cross your mind. You're not worried, oh, I hope my car will start. It's the same as the body. These diseases that we have today, these modern day diseases that we have today, are as a result of an energy shortage, metabolic dysfunction. If you restore that energy shortage, just like you put gas back in that car and the car starts again, those diseases are reversed because the cell that lacked energy, that caused it to become dysfunctional, disease, the cell now regains its energy and can work well. And there is a very smart health company that asked the question, why is it that 100 years ago our ancestors did not have these complications, and they answered the question. It had to do with nutrition, foods. They were consuming foods that had essential phytonutrients that kept their insulin working well, that kept their microbiome balanced. And so this health company asked the question, what if we could simulate the same phytonutrients that our ancestors were consuming, that kept their gut balance, that kept their insulin working well? Get those phytonutrients and just make it a product that we can just put those phytonutrients simply into a sachet to give people to take every day to be able to reorder their metabolism. And that's where the idea of this nutraceutical was. It's become one of my favorite tools in helping patients to be able to reverse metabolic dysfunction. It is made up of two things, a Unimate and the balance. I'll talk about those two. Those two things go to the core. They go and reverse insulin resistance and reverse dysbiosis. Let's talk about the Unimate first. The Unimate is made from a plant that is native to South America called the yerba mate plant. Okay. The special thing about the yerba mate plant is that the yerba mate plant is very rich in a polyphenol called chlorogenic acid. Polyphenols have, very important metabolic benefits. And what I'm going to single out to talk about how it addresses insulin resistance is the property of polyphenols causing lipolysis, fat burning. Now, so this Unimate contains chlorogenic acid, which is a polyphenol which helps in fat burning, lipolysis. So, how does that reverse insulin resistance? If you remember, the way we developed insulin resistance in the first place was a cell that was fat laden, filled with fat. And when the cell was filled with fat, when insulin came knocking at the door, the cell could not take up glucose for glucose to go through the electron transport chain so that energy could be produced, resulting in the energy shortage that then caused all these diseases. When you consume the Unimate, because the Unimate has a property of causing lipolysis, fat burning, it causes this cell that is fat laden to begin to burn the fat that is in it. And so this cell subsequently, as fat burning is occurring, gets to looking like this, less fat in it. And as you continue consuming the Unimate and lipolysis continues to occur, that cell now returns to a status quo where there is no more fat in it. It has gotten rid of all the fat. And that's good news because the glucose that was accumulating in the blood, because it could not initially get into this cell that was fat laden, now this cell is no longer fat laden. It has returned to normal. So glucose now is able to enter the cell at the command of insulin. When insulin knocks on the door of this cell, the cell can no longer give the same excuse. Glucose enters the cell. When glucose enters the cell, it goes through the electron transport chain and it results in the production of ATP, energy. Everybody is happy again. We got energy, we can function again. So the Unimate reversing the first step of insulin resistance. The second thing is that when the first step of insulin resistance is resolved, because the first step of insulin resistance triggered the second step of insulin resistance, which was too much insulin, it by defect causes the second step of insulin resistance or insulin not working well to resolve. So now all this glucose has entered the cell. Right? When all that glucose has entered the cell, initially the concentration of glucose in the blood was high. When all that glucose enters the cell, the concentration of glucose in the blood decreases. One-to-one relationship between glucose concentration and insulin production. So glucose concentration has now gone high. A message is sent to the pancreas that we now want you to produce a low amount of insulin. A low amount of insulin is like the CEO who had gone crazy, who comes to work one day and he gathers all of his employees for a meeting and says, "Hey guys, I have a big apology to make." With a contrite heart, with humility, he says, I have been a jerk for the last 2 months or so. I am incredibly sorry the way I spoke to you, the way I bullied you, the unreasonable things I did. And he says it with a contrite heart. Please, will you forgive me? The employees are taken aback by that humility of their boss man. They forgive their boss, and because of that, they regain their respect back for the boss. Okay, that's what low insulin is. You translate that to the cell. When they regain their respect back for the boss, they are more amenable or happy to do what the boss asks them to do. You translate that to the cell. When insulin becomes low, insulin goes from being a tyrant and a bully to the cell to come in with a humble head to the cell and say, I'm sorry. The cell now says, you know what? I could work with that humble insulin. When insulin now tells the cell, open your doors yay wide, the cell opens its door yay wide because the cell has regained its respect for insulin. And that reverses the Unamate by causing lipolysis, causing the cell to become like this and subsequently become like this, reverses the two ways in which your insulin stop working well. So that is the Unamate to reversing insulin resistance. The second product in the Feel Great system it's a fiber. It's a nutraceutical made out of fiber from several different plants. Fiber is amazing, and it helps in reversing insulin resistance the same way as Unamate does. Exactly the same stuff. It enhances fat burning and lipolysis. But the other thing that fiber does is that it slows the transit of food through the colon. And what are the implications of that? When food moves through the colon slowly, absorption occurs slowly. The release of glucose into the blood as a result occurs slowly. When food moves through the colon fast without fiber, absorption occurs fast. The release of glucose in the blood occurs fast. So when you consume fiber, it blunts your glucose rise. I'll explain it like this. If you and I went to an Italian restaurant to eat lasagna, and you ate your plate of lasagna, what your blood sugar is going to do is your blood sugar is going to do this. And that spiking your blood sugar up there may be a blood sugar of 180. So you've done that. And for me, I know a thing or two about fiber, that if I consume fiber, it's going to blunt my glucose rise. So I consume the balanced product, which is very rich in fiber, before eating my plate of lasagna. But I consume exactly the same quantity of lasagna that you consume. What my blood sugar will do after consuming exactly the same quantity, my blood sugar will do this. And that spike in my blood sugar may be 90. So you and I have consumed exactly the same plate of lasagna, but your blood sugar has gone up to 180, mine 90. The implications of that is because you have produced a blood sugar of 180, your pancreas is going to have to produce a commensurate higher amount of insulin to deal with that blood sugar of 180. So your pancreas is going to produce maybe 20 units of insulin, as an example, okay? For me, I have only produced 90 milligrams of glucose. So my pancreas is going to produce a commensurate lower amount of insulin to deal with that glucose. So for me, my pancreas may produce 5 units of insulin. This is what I want you guys to understand. 20 units of insulin, think of 20 units of insulin as a high amount of insulin. It's like the crazy CEO. The crazy CEO that his employees lost respect for. Think of 5 units of insulin as the CEO that is humble, that the employees have respect for. So when your insulin levels are lower, your cells are more sensitive to insulin, less resistant to insulin. The opposite is true. So that's what fiber does. It brings down our insulin, it brings down your insulin resistance, or in other words, improves your insulin sensitivity, makes your insulin work well. The last thing that fiber does, so that's what fiber does to insulin for insulin resistance. The last thing that fiber does is that fiber is food to the microbiome. And because fiber is food to the microbiome, it helps to reverse dysbiosis. Remember when I was talking about dysbiosis, I said the reason we have dysbiosis is when there is a shortage of food, shortage of fiber. And that sets into motion survival of the fetus. You know, you guys may not know it, but if you're a man, you're supposed to consume at least 38 grams of fiber a day. If you're a woman, you're supposed to consume, 25 grams of fiber a day, 25 grams a day at least. In the United States, the NIH estimates that the average man and woman is consuming 10 to 12 grams of fiber a day. Our ancestors, it's estimated that our ancestors consumed about 80 to 90 grams of fiber a day. By our ancestors, I mean you go 100 years ago. So fiber is so important for the health of the microbiome as well as for as well as for insulin resistance. So when you give the microbiome fiber, there's no shortage of food. Every organism, every living organism, whether it's a lion in the jungle of Cameroon, where I'm from, or a bacteria in your gut, requires nutrients to survive. And fiber is the nutrients, the food for the microbiome. So by doing those two things, the Unimate and the balance go and address the core problems that cause the energy shortage, the metabolic dysfunction, and as a result reverse that energy shortage. And when that energy shortage is reversed, your disease condition can be reversed. And that's good news. I end by saying that the Unimate, which is a nutraceutical made by this health company, is a wonderful tool to be able to restore metabolic health and to be able to get us to live to live as best of a life as we probably could and without diseases. I want to thank you guys for listening, and I'm going to now pass over the mic to Dr. Kenny to moderate from here for any questions. So this should be hope to you that if you restore your energy balance, you could reclaim your health again. Thank you. Dr. Kenny, you're on mute.
Sorry. There we go. I should be able to share. So to show a handful of photos, and I was going to have Keith share as well. I think I'm going to have it do this. Come on. There we go. So, yeah, so Dr. Dieter, this is a photo of me, and this is in February of 2024, almost March, right before I went in the hospital. And you can pretty much see how inflamed my face was. I was 240 to 50 pounds in this photo. Skin tags, belly fat, so many of the symptoms that you talked about, gut issues, sleep apnea. This was me about a month later, and I had ruptured my appendix and then went back in a few days after I got out. I was in there almost 2 months, nearly killed me. That's when I really dove into insulin because I had my epiphany. I was actually being injected with insulin while I was in the hospital. I'm like, and like you'd alluded to earlier, I was like, I'm not diabetic. Why am I being injected with insulin? So it was like one of those God things. And once I started this protocol, this was me over here. This was 35 days apart. Now, I've been able to reverse fatty liver, sleep apnea. My AFib is gone. I've lost 50 pounds. I don't even step on the scale anymore, but between these two photos, it was over 50 pounds. My chronic joint pain is gone. I mean, energy is out the roof. I feel incredible. This is Keith, who we're going to have speak. This is his diabetic foot ulcer, right? When he had diabetes. And we like to show this to show people when you hear of a diabetic ulcer, this is what this is. And Dr. Dieter, I believe it's around, was it 5 years, I think you said, sir? Like when someone gets something like this, if they lose a limb, it's about 5 years what they have to live for, isn't it?
Yeah, the complications increases your chances of mortality higher and
Wow.
amputation, yeah.
Now, one thing that I do love about this too, if this protocol makes sense to you, if you're thinking about it, this is something that I have found as well. Look at this gentleman here. Look at the muscle and how much leaner, right? I've leaned up, I've added muscle, but when I started using this, it was funny. I didn't even tell my wife to do this. And she just started watching me transform. And our company provides a $10 coupon for each referral. So make sure, that Dr. Dieter will mention this, but there's a referral code. If it makes sense to you, you want to try it, you can actually share it with your family and friends. And this is what he did. This is my friend John. John lives down in Texas, your guys' great state. He's in Brownsville, down near Mexico. John had never tried, he'd never drank alcohol, had a fatty liver, 67 years young, triple digit high blood pressure, both numbers, diastolic and systolic, or systolic diastolic. And he also had sleep apnea, was waking up his neighbors. This right here was a matter, I think it was 7 weeks apart. He's dropped 60 plus pounds, fat liver's gone, hypertension's gone. I mean, this man, he's incredible. Here's the stud himself, Dr. Dieter. So, Doc, I think you said here, you were eating the standard American way, standard American diet.
Yeah, I was 220 pounds in the very first picture.
Oh my gosh, man. Now here, I don't know what you weigh, but I mean, this was you fasting, right? For
Yeah.
6 years?
In the black, I was 178.
Okay. And then this is you 2 months on the protocol, if memory serves, correct?
That's correct. 2 months, exactly 2 months.
And I mean, you can see the lean. I mean, like, it's just crazy just by adding the tea and the fiber. Now, this is a friend of mine, Colleen. She's down also in Austin. And I mean, look at this. This is a year apart. She's got off of 4 3/4 medication. She reversed her type 2 off metformin. She also got off of her statins. And you can obviously see this. Her mood is completely changed. I mean, she's like only on a quarter of her thyroid medication. So this is our friend Deb. So Dr. Dieter was talking heavily about dysbiosis. Like, you may have heard it called leaky gut as well, right? This Deb over here on the left side, he was a size 12. She had severe insulin resistance, gut dysbiosis. She had headaches, low testosterone, and also had IBS. And this is 7 months apart. She dropped from a size 12 to a size 4. Her headaches are gone, her allergies are gone, and her IBS is gone. So we see all kinds of results. This is Angelita, a friend of ours. And these right here, she was on 6 meds per day. Her husband is a doctor of pharmacy. She's a nurse practitioner. I mean, you can see the difference in her legs, her midsection, her face. I mean, God, look at this. And she was on 5 GERD and IBS medications per day and 1 antidepressant. In 2 weeks, she was able to get off all of that. So I always like to share this too, Doctor. I need to get this to you, but this is from Canada. And what I want you guys to see down here in the lower left-hand corner, it says low energy. So we get a lot of questions about caffeine. There is some natural caffeine in this, but there's theobromine in this. So this is not something where you get like that epinephrine effect of caffeine, like with coffee or other caffeinated drinks. This is nothing like that at all. Theobromine opens up the blood vessels, calms it down. I had cardiac AFib. I had zero issues. So if you do, you can dilute it. Dr. Dieter can teach that, but I just like to show that this is considered a low energy drink actually. So it puts you into mild ketosis. But Keith, I would love for you to share if you wouldn't mind, brother. You've had some pretty awesome results with this. And I've got another photo I can pull up too, Dr. Dieter, of another individual. And this other person also had a foot ulcer, John Frost. So sometimes he's on here. I don't think John's on tonight though.
Yeah, I don't believe he is. So yeah, thanks, Dr. Kenny and Dr. Dieter. I was type 2 diabetic for 25 years. Was on insulin 95% of that time, ever increasing amounts. And back in 2018, I was diagnosed with a autoimmune disorder affecting my nervous system. And then in January, and after that, I was plagued with leg wounds, foot wounds. I mean, they were pretty much nonstop. And that came to a head in January of this year when I succumbed to a foot wound that got septic, and actually I passed away and got brought back a little bit later. And I made it my personal mission to better myself. I was fixing to have a grandson. I, and I was not in a very good place. Like Dr. Dieter had mentioned about depression. I was in a pretty dark place. Didn't think I was going to be around in 2 years. And ever since I started gaining control of my health and using this protocol, I now have hope for the future, and I'm now looking forward to spending many more years on the planet, getting to meet my grandson and spend more time with him. But on day one, my energy shot through the roof. I'm back in the gym. I haven't been in the gym in 30 years, since I was in my mid 20s. Um, Day two, I was off all of that insulin entirely, and the progress just went up from there. At one point, keep in mind, my diabetic injections were 6 times a day. I was getting injections in both eyes. Um, and since I've been on the protocol, I no longer take insulin as of day two. I was on 15 medication. I no longer, in the first month and a half, I was down to just one, and now I'm off all medications entirely. My joint pain is gone, my brain fog is gone, and I had had multiple surgeries, probably in the about 8 surgeries trying to fix nerves. So I could, I had neuropathy was out of control. I know I now have a pulse in my feet, which my doctor hasn't felt in years, since he started treating me originally for the original foot wound 4 or 5 years ago.
Could
Um,
you show us that transition of that wound, what it did with the field grade system, how your wound healed
I
while
don't
you're
have the
talking?
picture,
I can
Brock.
pull that. I'll pull it up. I got
Okay,
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
keep going on.
but
Keep
when
going,
when
Steve.
they found the foot ulcer, they found it in December of last year, and then in after 2 months of hyperbaric chamber and
That's
all
right here.
that, that's what the second picture is, where it was at when it wouldn't heal. And now there's my foot today, as of about 2 weeks ago. Um, it has, when I left the hospital, I couldn't walk. I was on knee scooters and, with crutches and walkers and wheelchairs. I had in-home therapy, in-home nurses, and it has literally, I'm up and moving for the first time better than I have in easily 6, 8 years. Um, it just slowly declined, and I didn't even realize how sick I was until I went in the hospital. Then things started coming together, um, but yeah, in the first about 45 to 60 days, I lost 50 pounds, and now I've lost, at 90 days, I was down 65 pounds, 11 inches on my waist. My blood work is all came into line. My eyesight has actually improved. My eye doctor hasn't seen my eyes look this good in over 4 years. Um, my blood pressure was the last thing to finally come into line. That was the one pill I took. And then I haven't felt this good. I literally felt 10 to 15 years older than I am, and now I feel 10 to 15 years younger than I actually am. So it has truly transformed my life for the, I know where I'd be if Dr. Kenny wouldn't have said yes, and Marie wouldn't have said yes, Dr. Dieter wouldn't have said yes. I know where I would be right now. So thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
So happy for you, brother. This right here, Dr. Dieter, is John Frost. He's also, he had a foot ulcer as well. It was cleared up in a month. So I just like to show like that we've seen this over and over again. Someone asked a question. I'd like to show someone. This is another gentleman, and this is pretty freaking nuts, but his name, I call this guy George Maple Syrup Vila. And the picture on the left, George had a fasting blood glucose level at 2 p.m. in the afternoon of 834. He goes, I went in later because I knew my blood sugar would be lower. The hospital called him, like thought he was going to stroke out. He was out playing golf, no lie. His A1C was 18.2 in that photo. Now, fast forward 107 days over here in the right. This man's 73 years young. His A1C was 7.2, still diabetic, but his fasting blood sugar was 90. He lost 14 inches off his waistline, but he added 9 pounds on the scale. Now, the reason I bring this up is if you're insulin resistant, you can't tap into fat to burn it when you're not eating. You're in storage mode. And so a lot of times when people lose weight doing dieting or injections or other things, they're losing almost 50% of what they lose is muscle and bone. And in his case, we've seen this over and over again. People add muscle. So even though the scale weight went up in this man, his muscle went up. And I can tell you, I've gained muscle. I do 25 pull-ups. I'm going to be 48 next week. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So I wanted to make sure I addressed that. I saw that. And Dr. Dieter, if you have anything to add, please do so, brother.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to quickly answer the question that the donor, I think you posed. Your question was, what if you get often asked that what if you're not overweight, on any meds, how will the Feel Great system work for you? So
Right.
what I will say to this is 9 out of 10 people that live in America, 9 out of 10 people have metabolic dysfunction and energy shortage. And you do not have to be overweight to have that. I was a doctor and I had metabolic dysfunction. If you have, let me just say some of the things that you may not be on medications, but you have metabolic dysfunction. And you don't have to be overweight to have metabolic dysfunction. And it may just be that you have something going on in your engine that is not enough to trigger your check engine light to come on yet. But that thing is festering in your engine. At some point, your check engine light will come on. So you don't have to be overweight or to be on medicines. There are certain things that you can ask yourself to say whether you have insulin resistance. I know there's top 10 metabolic diseases in the US. Some of those, are easy ways to tell whether you have insulin resistance or metabolic dysfunction, pre-diabetes. If you have high blood pressure, you don't have to be on medications. There's some people who have high blood pressure, a blood pressure of greater than 120, is abnormal, is high blood pressure. That's an indication of metabolic dysfunction. If you have fatty liver, if you have high cholesterol, 2 in every 5 adults in the United States have high cholesterol. If you feel, pre-diabetes, if you have, you have cravings for food 1 or 2 hours after you've eaten, you're ravenous, always wanting to snack on something. Those are signs of metabolic dysfunction. So I don't want you to take away from this that you have to have a weight issue, because weight is only one symptom of metabolic dysfunction. There are so many branches of that tree, or so many leaves that come from that tree that have to do with metabolic dysfunction, and weight is just one of them. You can be totally in normal health. I wish Megan was here. Megan, who is a doctor, who is Amory's partner. Megan was perfect weight, but Megan had dysbiosis, and Megan did not know it. One of the things things which is linked to dysbiosis, acid reflux. There's so many Americans who have acid reflux, heartburn. They don't know, but it's linked to your gut. So you don't have to be unhealthy or overweight. You don't have to have an unhealthy figure, obese or overweight on medications to have metabolic dysfunction or to have dysbiosis. Those things can be there with you in perfect weight. So you have to ask the questions: what are the other things that point to the fact that I have an energy shortage? No problem. Are there any other questions?
Fantastic.
Well, if there are no other questions, I'll close out and say this. Wonderful. Thank you, Donna. I'll close us out by saying this. Um, this should be hope to all of us. It should be hope that we can live lives different than what we've been living. Our ancestors never had these diseases because of the way they lived. And we could have that change now because this nutraceutical product gives you the opportunity to reorder your metabolism. It gives you the opportunity to live life in prevention, live life in health. I mentioned the statistic here that 10 to 30% of cancers are due to bad luck. The other 70% are preventable due to energy deficiencies. So all of these diseases that we mentioned, there is hope that you could reclaim your health again. You could live free of these diseases. So if you're on here today for the very first time and you have heard about this, you have any of these illnesses that are linked to insulin resistance, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, sleep apnea, what have you, arthritis. I want you to hear this and hear it. There is hope for you. There are thousands of people who have had their lives back just by incorporating these phytonutrients into their lives. Their lives have changed. And the same fate awaits you in doing so. And we have this talk 3 times a week, every Sunday, Monday, and Friday, because the call is urgent. Yeah, we want as many people as possible to be able to know that diabetes is 100% reversible. Gout is 100% reversible. High blood pressure is 100% reversible. High cholesterol is 100% reversible. And you name it, and this gives you the possibility to do that. So please, if you enjoyed what you heard, and it's something which has impacted you, we would love you to invite, number one, invite to our next call. Dr. Kenny, I don't think we're going to have a call on Friday because we have a big convention. So the call on Friday is not going to take place, and so the call on Friday will not take place for sure. I think our next call is going to have to be Sunday. We'll all be coming back from the cruise somewhere around that time. But we will love you to invite to the next call, and we could make that available to you. Anybody who you think may benefit from this information. If you're on here for the first time and you're interested in beginning this nutraceutical to help you with your own issue, please get in touch with whoever invited you. They can give you a special discount code for you to get it. The last thing that I want to say is that we are looking for helpers. We are looking for partners. We are looking for people.
Sitting there with Jerry Jones.
We are looking for people to join this cause with us. You see, we don't have enough of us telling our communities, telling America, telling the world that our diseases are reversible. So many more people are not privy to this information because we don't have as many voices shouting out the information. So one of the reasons why we do this is, one, we want to touch the next life, the next life, the next life. The other reason why we do this is we want to encourage you guys to consider joining us, our mission, our team, to be able to propagate this message to us. My hand, Dr. Kenny's hands, and a lot of us, our hands are limited. We only know who we know. Our reach can only be to a certain extent. But when we partner with the next person and the next person and the next person, we are extending our sphere of influence to be able to echo out this message of hope to as many people as possible. So if you've listened to this today and it's something that, gives you a conscience grip, that is a mission worth being a part of, please get with one of us. We would like you to join our team to help us in spreading this message. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dieter.
All right. Good night.
Dr. Dieter, won't be this Sunday. We're on the cruise.
Say that again.
It won't be this Sunday because we're on the cruise.
Okay, so on Sunday we're on the cruise, right?
Monday, we come back Wednesday, I think, brother.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not gonna have a call on Friday because we're also gonna be so Friday and Sunday we're not gonna have a call, but our next call will be on Monday.
We'll be on the cruise Sunday through Wednesday, just so you know.
So it means that we may not have the next 3 meetings then, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, we'll be back. We will regroup and we'll be back. Yeah.
We
Thank
don't even know where we're at. We're so busy with this.
Yes, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Kenny.
Thank
And
you, brother.
thank you to everyone. Good night.